Welcome back to the Lucan Center YouTube channel. And today I'm very excited because we have Jessica Colucci joining us, who is one of our senior child adolescent clinicians here at the practice. And today we're going to talk about self-esteem, because I think everybody could benefit in checking in with themselves and seeing what their self-concept is like, how they feel about themselves. But today we're going to focus on kids and adolescents, and just in general, like at least the way I'm thinking about it, a lot of changes for kids and adolescents. At least what I've noticed is that's where their self-esteem, their self-concept, how they think about themselves may change. Yeah. I mean, on the one hand, it's pretty obvious. Something changes, of course, something might happen. But in your experience, in your practice, like how do you deal with that? Is that a common presentation when the parents are coming in talking about their kids, or maybe it's an older adolescent joining a new sport, or maybe changing schools, or maybe they're entering puberty? I'm sure a lot of this could manifest itself in how the adolescent feels and sees themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Changes bring on so many difficulties and a lot of negative self-talk, because when we're going into a change, it's unexpected. And when we don't know what to expect, that's when the anxiety increases. So a lot of the negativity, because anxiety can be really negative, is going to start to flood in with those negative thinking patterns about ourselves, who we are, and how we're going to be able to manage the change. So when we're setting these really high expectations, it also creates this big jump in anxiety, and also can start to deflate self-esteem because kids start to feel like they're not capable of doing what this change is bringing on.
Gotcha. Let me ask you a question. So you've been seeing kids, teens, young adults through potentially pre-change, right? During change, and after change. Could you talk a little bit about how you actually see that present itself in the therapy room? Because I would imagine, let's say you take a kid, a preteen, a teen who feels somewhat comfortable. A trigger happens, be it parents are moving, or be it they break up with their first love. And how does that like change? Do you notice it right there and then? They maybe didn't have as much negative talk, and now all of a sudden there's a lot more. Is that sort of stark, or is it gradual? Like, what do you typically notice?
It's so tough because every kid is so different, but generally I'm getting that feedback from the parents first before the kids are able to identify it. And sometimes parents also can inflate what's going on because they can see a change in their kids. They start to get anxious about it and they want me to know, which is totally understandable. Their parents are the experts on their children, so they're going to be the best informers to me about what's going on. Sometimes I see a change in the office, but more often than not, again, it's that information that's coming in from the parents, and what they're seeing is behavior changes. I see. So more often than not, we're going to see behavior changes in kids and adolescents because they're able to show behavior better than they're able to express themselves with words. And that's what we're working on when they come into the office. So if the parents are telling me there's something going on, there's a behavior shift, maybe they decided, they're going to middle school and all of a sudden they don't want to play soccer, but they've been a soccer player this whole time. It's usually an indication that there's something going on, there's a reason, and it's not just that they don't want to play soccer, but something external is happening. And that's when I would bring that in and start to talk about it in a child-friendly way, meet them where they're at developmentally. For sure. And do you notice that I mean, obviously kids, adolescents are different, but do you notice that it's, are kids more ready to talk about it once you bring it up? And they're just more like, you kind of right? Or do you notice kind of more defensiveness just going forward? Yeah, I think that once it gets brought up, the initial is, oh my God, my mom and dad talked to you. And that's so annoying, which is fair. And I always leave it on the table. It's here if you want to talk about it. They noticed it. It seems like something's going on. This is your space to talk about it. And it's confidential. So if there is something going on that's bigger, it doesn't have to get back to them, unless, of course, there's a risk factor where I'm a mandated reporter and I have to share. So I'm constantly having that conversation with them too. And then as we're going, kids think they're slick, and I'm a little bit slicker, and it starts to come out.
I hear you. No, it kind of, plus, if you're in a safe space and you're talking to somebody with whom you enjoy having sessions with, at some point, you kid, adolescent, you want to start feeling better. So I would imagine it's going to start coming out because there's it's almost like a pressure cooker, like it's there, and if you're giving a space, you already labeled it and named it, I'm sure that could kind of help with that expression.
Yeah, exactly. And so when they're coming in, they, maybe they're talking about something else, but then it makes its way into that thing that is causing those difficulties. And when we eventually get there, I always try to put a name onto it, and I try to elicit those feelings, because sometimes kids just really don't know or recognize that it's a feeling that's causing what their bodily reactions are, what their behavior changes are. So when we start to talk about, oh, this is actually stemming from anxiety, and this is what our bodies look like when we feel anxious, and I do some psychoeducation around that, then it can open it up a little bit more for them to dive in a little bit deeper.
That's very cool. So once you notice the change and the self-concept, self-esteem kind of takes a little bit of a dip, what do you typically do? So for some of the viewers, let's say there's a parent watching or a preteen or a teen watching, what would you suggest would be the warning signs to look after, and more importantly, are there a couple of things that they could at least start observing or start implementing?
Yeah, so again, those behavior changes at home going to be the biggest indicator. Are they withdrawing from their friends? Are they withdrawing from certain aspects of school? Were they really good at school and all of a sudden grades are dipping? Are they trying to pull away from sports or activities? Those are going to be some of those biggest warning signs that there's something going on internally, typically related to self-esteem or self-acceptance. And then if they're wanting to get into therapy, what they might see on my side is being able to combat any negative thought patterns. So cognitive behavior therapy is really a beneficial way of approaching it, because we're taking the negative thought patterns and then we're breaking them down, and we're giving evidence as to why it may be true and evidence to why it's not true. And when we actually lay all of that out and see it, why it's not true, usually is going to win. And they're going to be able to say, okay, now I have a positive thought pattern that I can implement, and that's what I'm going to combat this negative thought with. Doesn't mean that the negative thought is necessarily going to go away. But as we know, when we use a mindfulness technique, we let it pass by, we give it no judgment, and then we try to instill positive. I have kids actually talk into the mirror and say positive affirmations. They try to combat those negative thoughts. It's like they're talking to somebody, but they're really talking to themselves. So it could be a really useful tool. It feels weird, it sounds weird, but the kids who do it have really good success.
No, and you're right. I think that's a great way of really looking in one's own eyes to be able to really embody that positive affirmation that might be so helpful. Any tips for parents? We get a good amount of calls where parents are just looking for guidance, like, I think my kid, my preteen, my adolescent, young adult really would benefit from coming in, but I don't even know how to approach it. I mean, I've made suggestions, I've said this, I've said that, obviously nothing works. But now I'm calling you and I'd like to bring them in, but I'm not really sure how to engage in that sort of conversation. Any tips there? Anything that some of the viewers can take away, maybe start implementing?
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes up a lot even once they go from you and then to us as a therapist too. That conversation is still happening. I've even had a teenager walk in and go, I saw the word psychotherapy. Like, do you think I'm psycho? It can be really confusing, and can feel really big. And so I always tell parents, I'm happy to talk to them, but when you're engaging in that conversation of, we're going to go see this person, it's really all about them. And teenagers like to hear that. That's where they are developmentally. And I think everybody likes the idea of having a space for themselves. So if parents are able to take away, I'm doing this so that you have a space that's not me or your dad, and you get to go and talk about whatever it is that you want. This is for you. It's 45 minutes about you every week, and things that are coming up, and you don't have to talk to us about it. And a lot of times that's a really big barrier to be broken down, because kids feel like, oh, if my parents are involved in therapy, they're gonna try to dictate what's gonna happen. And sometimes it does happen that way, but as therapists, we know, and we're constantly talking about it as child and adolescent therapists, this is their time, and within limits of confidentiality, we get to keep that that sanctity of that, really. So it's really just kind of making it about how this is really going to be beneficial for them.
Yeah, that's a great way to present it, because you're right. Sometimes they probably could see it as a punitive kind of thing. I misbehaved, now I have to do it. But in a way, to frame it in a way, this is your space for you, where you can talk about anything you want. I think that's a great selling point for a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really works. Kids sometimes will come in and ask why they have to come. They think they are in trouble, especially the younger ones, like, oh, I'm here because I'm in trouble. I always try to tell them, you're never in trouble with me. That's not what we do here. I'm not a teacher. I'm not your parent. I'm a person who's here to help you learn about your feelings, understand them, what's happening to our bodies, why it's happening, and we get to break all of those things down every single week. So this is your space to do that, and it can be really fun too and enjoyable.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, guys. Thanks so much as always for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.